Welcome to an introduction to Solaris and Karma. Let's go over what we're going to be covering, what we're not going to be covering, and also who this series is built for. So to start off with, let's talk about what we are going to cover. We're going to be covering the Solaris fundamentals. So the basics of Solaris will cover the viewport or the Solaris desktop. We'll cover kind of how Solaris works in general and how you can start creating things and the difference between LOPs and the geometry context. So we'll get a basic understanding of Solaris and then we'll start to build out our scenes. So we are going to create and show you how to create and organize scenes. The goal is to be able to start to make stuff in Solaris. This is going to be a real basic introduction to it. So we're going to start off, you don't need any third-party assets or anything like that. We're not going to be diving super deep into a bunch of different concepts. I've got other stuff on my channel that I have covered inside of Solaris, so you can check out that stuff if you're interested in diving more into that. But this is going to get you up and running with Solaris. We're going to be using very basic shapes that we're going to be able to create a render with and just kind of get used to working with Solaris and how it all works. So we are going to be covering shading and lighting with that. So we'll cover how we can create shaders with Karma, and we're going to be looking at the light mixer as well as the lights inside of Solaris and some of the cool things that Solaris allows you to do with lights, because there's some things that you can do inside Solaris that you can't do inside of the normal geometry context with your lighting, and just makes things a little bit easier. So I want to cover all of that. We're also going to be covering rendering. As I said, we're going to be using Karma, specifically Karma XPU. So if you haven't jumped into Karma XPU and you want to start learning about Material X and that sort of thing, we're going to be covering how we can go about creating Material X shaders, how we can set up textures and everything like that. So we'll get an introduction to all of that as well. So what are we not going to cover? We're not going to be covering the basics of Houdini, so I do expect that you have at least a limited understanding of Houdini. You don't necessarily need to be an expert, but you do need to know how to create nodes and things of that nature. We're not going to be going over, the very basics of the interface and everything like that. So I expect you to have a little bit of an introduction to Houdini before you jump into this. And honestly, I would recommend that people actually start working in Solaris instead of working in the geometry context, even if they're experienced or even if they're new. Doesn't matter. I'd say that Solaris is where the future is and where everyone should just kind of start to migrate to. It is getting better and better with each release of Houdini, and there's a lot of features inside of Solaris that you don't have inside of the regular geometry context that allow you to work more quickly and just work more efficiently. So we're also not going to be covering the ins and outs of USD, and I'm doing this for a very specific purpose. USD can get very complex, and I don't really want to cover that because you really don't need to know a whole lot about USD to start working inside Solaris. You can start building out scenes with a very limited understanding of Solaris. Now, obviously, of USD, I mean. And now, obviously, if you're working inside of a studio, you're going to want to have a lot better understanding of USD. But this isn't really that sort of a series. This is just trying to get people up and running with Solaris and Karma, because I think a lot of people think that you need to have a good understanding of USD and all the complexities of it in order to work with Solaris, and that's just completely false. You do not need to know very much about USD at all. We're not going to cover it hardly at all. We'll cover a few things that we do need to know about USD, but most things you're not going to need to know about USD in order to work effectively inside Solaris, and I just want to make that known, because I don't want people going into this thinking that we're going to be covering a lot of USD. We're really not. We're going to be just covering what we need to know, and that's really limited in order to start working in Solaris. And I want people to also understand that they can work in Solaris effectively without knowing a ton of USD. So lastly, who is this series for? This series is for people that are new to Houdini, but that have a general understanding of the software. As I said before, I expect you to know a little bit about Houdini, how to create nodes, how the UI works and everything like that. I don't expect you to be an expert, but I do expect people to at least understand how the software itself works a little bit. And also, we are making this series for people who are looking to get started with Solaris. So you don't have to be an expert in Solaris. This is not really going to help you out all that much if you've been working in it a lot. But people that are interested in getting into Solaris, this is who this series is going to be for. If you've been on the fence about getting into it, you're worried about USD and things like that, don't be. Go ahead and start out with this, and we'll show just kind of how easy it is to get into Solaris and how it can really speed up your workflow, because there's a lot of things that are available in Solaris that will really speed up your workflow and increase your quality of life that you don't necessarily have access to in the geometry context or the normal way of working inside Houdini. So definitely recommend that people jump into Solaris and start to learn it, because it is very, very powerful tool. And like I said before, I think it's the future of where Houdini is going, and it's the best implementation that I've seen for USD. So if you do want to make the jump into a studio or something like that, where you're going to be working with USD a lot more, then this is where you want to be. You want to be working in Houdini with Solaris, in my opinion. But anyways, that is an overview of what we're going to be covering in this series. So this will be a multi-part thing. This will be going on for a while. And like I said before, we're not going to need any third-party assets or anything like that. You don't need a third-party renderer. You're welcome to use one if you have one available to you. But we're going to be building everything with Karma, XPU, and very simple geometry that we have inside Houdini, so that we can show kind of how everything works and start to build out a scene without having to worry too much about the geometry. So anyways, stay tuned for all of the videos coming out on that. Thank you all for watching, and have a good day.